Hello, hello. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, How to Build the Business Case for Database DevOps. We're so happy that you're able to join us today. I'm Shay Mann from Liquibase, and I'll be your moderator today. Let's go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. So questions are welcome throughout the webinar. Please post those in the Q&A panel, and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. We will also be recording today's webinar, and so you'll be able to get that via email tomorrow, rewatch, or be able to share with interested colleagues. I'd love to introduce our host for today. We have Jonathan No joining us, who is a 25-year veteran of the data and software industries. Jonathan is the Senior Vice President of Tech Operations and Enterprise DBA Leader for a national mortgage company. His previous experience includes software and database engineering, architecture, and leadership roles. We also have Ryan Campbell joining us today, who is the VP of Customer Success here at Liquibase. Ryan and his team help teams launch, implement, optimize, and expand database DevOps for organizations across numerous industries. Ryan draws his expert strategic insights from his experience as a developer, an engineering leader, and co-founder of CloudBees, the company behind Jenkins. So we have got a lot to cover today, so let's jump in and get started.
All right. Thanks, Shay. Jonathan, I really appreciate you setting aside some time to chat today. I think this is really going to be a valuable conversation. So to kind of start us off, can you give us a summary of how your company uses databases today and what role your team plays in that?
Today being a mortgage company, we collect a lot of mortgage data. We have to deal with a lot of federal regulations, MPPI, SOX. So a lot of our data is managed at the database level, and people access it, people read it, people update it. It is throughout the company at all levels. So.
Okay, great. So can you give us an idea of the different types of databases that you're dealing with, and maybe the scale, like the number of databases, that kind of thing?
Yeah, this is the first company that I've actually been with that is actually open to a lot of the databases. We've got MySQL, we've got Postgres, we've got MongoDB, DynamoDB. We have MySQL, and I'm hearing rumors of Oracle as well. So I probably need to dig into that too. But we've got a whole list of things that we need to manage here.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. A lot of our customers, they just have so many different databases that they're dealing with, and it's really growing all the time. So, yeah. All right. So before we kind of dive into our agenda, I wanted to share the results of the registration poll. And kind of looking at the results here, we can see that most of you are in the initial or managed phase of DevOps adoption. So really, you're either kind of at the point of getting started or just in the first steps of your phase. And so I think you're really going to benefit from our time here today. Jonathan, where do you see your company like on this chart, like in terms of when you first started on your journey and where you are now?
I kind of see us right where managed is. We've got some automation going. There's room for improvements. There's places where I want to go. I mean, I'd love to be an optimized, but we got to take it step by step just to get there. So we're really more at the beginning phases. I'd love to move forward a little bit faster, but things needs to be at its own pace. So
yeah. Well, I guess you have to start somewhere, right? Yeah. All right. Cool. So we're going to run through about 6 different items in our agenda, and really our goal here is to kind of explore Jonathan's database, the DevOps story. And so we're focused on how Jonathan, communicated the business value to all these different stakeholders across his company, not only to kind of get their buy-in, but just their enthusiasm for the project. And so after this webinar, you should have the tools that you need to, really kind of initiate these DevOps initiatives in your own company and get that stakeholder alignment that you need to make this happen. So let's dive into Jonathan's story at the beginning when he was experiencing a bit of Database release chaos. All right. So Jonathan, what kinds of pains were you and your team experiencing that really made it clear to you that your database release process was chaotic?
We don't have a consistent workflow. Everybody are either sending us scripts in a file or sending us scripts in an email or sending us scripts in, a text on some sort of ticket or something to deploy to production. So the lack of consistency created a lot of chaos on our end. The instructions to deploy scripts have always been, never always consistent. People say, hey, deploy this script, then deploy this one, then deploy this one. And then, we're always trying to organize it and follow those instructions. So I'm not a good instruction follower.
Well, if it's manual, I mean, there's no way to, really consistently improve the process, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Surprising. I'm kind of curious, how did this chaos affect your metrics?
It was difficult to attain any metrics. It was extremely difficult to make any decisions on what we need to do and where we need to improve. Without good data, the direction that you're trying to drive the team or the company or progress is extremely difficult. You have to go out and collect this raw data yourself by doing interviews, which isn't very scientific, but I like to collect it from the back end instead and go from there.
Yeah. So when the process is manual, so is the data collection, right?
Exactly.
Okay. And so it really seems like the DBA teams were just overwhelmed with all these tedious tasks. Wasn't there more valuable stuff that they could be doing and delivering to the organization?
Oh yeah, I totally believe it. I mean, DBAs are specialists. I mean, there really aren't that many of them out there. They have special knowledge, they have special skill set, and we hire these guys to help us progress through. DBAs in my line of work, I mean, we should be what I've been telling everybody is keeping the database humming. If the database have issues, if it's got memory issues, if it's got long-running queries, if somebody's doing something that is not in the profession, we're going to have problems in the production environment. I would prefer my DBAs to be proactively doing analysis and doing research and how to make things better rather than being reactive. There's a fire, go put it out. There's another fire, go put it out. Those are things that I would like to see my DBAs doing.
Yeah, for sure. I can appreciate that. So what did you decide to do?
Automate. Get DevOps in, start implementing CI/CD. We need to have these things done, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'm sure you kind of had the automation, kind of like the slide shows here. You had the app pipeline automated maybe, and then the database release process was so painful and so slow, and so there's like a huge gap there, right?
Yeah, huge turnovers.
Yeah. So you landed on the conclusion that CI/CD needed to extend not just at the application layer, but also at the database layer.
Yeah, definitely. I don't, database CI/CD is kind of tricky. We can't just drop a database and restore it. We've got data that we need to maintain. We've got structures. We've got, all kinds of stuff that we need to do on the database level. So it's not just, hey, let's just move a binary file into a folder, and if it doesn't work, we'll just undo it.
Okay. So where did you become familiar with database DevOps?
I've been in the industry for a while now, and I hear rumors about it, and you search on the web, you see it happening. The idea of needing to have something like this done is out there. So it took some time. You had to do the analysis and do the research.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Once you had kind of identified the problem and you were aware of the potential solution, what did you still have to learn?
Who's the leader?
Okay.
Who's making it work? Who based on my experience and my patterns and what I do and my habits of what I've done as a database engineer, who's mimicking some of that stuff, and doesn't make sense. And I had to question myself too. Do I know everything? Are some of this idea a little bit better than what I have in mind? So I had to be open to some of those things.
Right. So you were probably looking for experts to kind of help you with that journey, right?
Oh yeah. I'm not the expert. I know other people. I'd rather go get it from them.
Yeah. Okay. So you realized kind of DevOps for databases was the answer, but what convinced your organization to go with Liquibase?
Flexibility, pattern, the flexibility of the pattern, the security that I know that a file is going to go to production, that consistency. CI/CD has allowed us to be consistent in all environment because we made it a rule. If you are not successfully deploying in the lower environment, we're not going to deploy in the production environment. And so some of these rules have actually helped us out in the long run.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that automation and consistency were key for your criteria. Okay. And so, looking at this slide right here, Jonathan, we see kind of a sample of all the different tools that Liquibase can integrate with. Can you just talk us through, what is your tech stack coming from, the developer perspective all the way over to production?
Yeah, our dev team use a variety of IDEs. They'll use Visual Code, Studio Code. I don't think we use Eclipse here as much. I don't know that too many people use Xcode. My DBAs or our data side, we use SSMS. There's some other tools that's being used for Postgres as well. And so, it's a different variety. We don't really hold them out to a standard now.
Right.
So,
right. You give them freedom. I mean, developers, they want some autonomy, right?
Yeah. And that's okay too, because at the end of the day, the code is just a text file, right? And then we have we put all of our code into GitLab. We have a repository. We dump everything in there. We're starting to move more people into GitLab. Just for the consistency. We want to provide some sort of a structure, because to manage the chaos, you got to define a structure, right? And then from there, provide developers and provide engineers their autonomy. Say, hey, you can have autonomy, but play in this realm.
Right.
Kind of like driving on the freeway. You can have autonomy to drive in whichever lane, but hey, keep it to 70 miles an hour.
Okay, great. So it sounds like you identified, that Liquibase was the right fit from both a kind of a technology perspective, that it integrated with all of your different tools, but also that it kind of mapped to your software development lifecycle. And so now you're at the point where you have to bring the initiative to the stakeholders, right? And you have to get approval and buy-in and all of that kind of stuff, right? So let's dive into that. Yeah. And so we're going to talk about stakeholders and their stakes. And so we're going to really understand of all of these personas, Jonathan, that you had to make the case to, what was important to each, right? And so just so that our audience can kind of walk away with a good set of tools for speaking with each persona.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so now we're going to do our first poll here. And the question is, which stakeholder is the hardest to convince of the value of database DevOps? So, as you're making your case, which one do you have the most challenges with? And so our options are, the C-suite, the technology and operations leaders, maybe the application development leaders, DBAs, or the software development teams themselves. And so just kind of curious what people are seeing out there. Okay. And so, so we see DBAs and database teammates. Wow, that's surprising. Is that surprising to you, Jonathan?
That is surprising to me.
Yeah.
But I've always thought it was software dev teams, or C, the leaders, the dev leaders. They have ownership. They want control. and they want to make sure that their code is deployed to production. So,
right. Well, sometimes it kind of depends on where the need is most felt, right?
yeah.
And so sometimes it's those, it's the software side of the house that's really feeling the pain, and maybe not so much the database team. So that's really interesting. All right. So we'll stop sharing that. And okay, so I'm going to move on now. All right. So before we dive into the personas, we've listed several best practices here that you want to keep in mind when you're making the case for database DevOps. And so I think it's important to remember that when you're building a business case, you're not looking to get a yes or no answer. What you really want to do is like build an alliance of people who are like aligned around this problem of improving the database process, right? So I think it's helpful to kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to pick one here that is really resonates with me, and that's articulating the pain. I think, oftentimes when you're in a large organization, you've got different people doing different things. People don't realize kind of how painful this problem is to other people in the organization, right? Yeah. And so I think one of the jobs that you have to do maybe as a when you're presenting this business case is just help your stakeholders feel that pain viscerally, right? Like how tedious this is and how painful and how error prone, and really, kind of telling that story, right?
Yeah.
I guess, Jonathan, which one of these resonate with you the most here?
I think the biggest one I had was also the pain. You got to express to people that DBAs aren't 24/7. I mean, one person can't be 24/7. We have this work-life balance that we want to respect, and as leaders, we want to make sure that we define ourselves correctly. I had to when I took this job. I mean, everybody were telling me, hey, you're in a lot of pain. You're going to have it. And I said, what do you mean? And when I started doing it, I said, oh my gosh, you guys think the pain is here. It's actually up here. And so I had to get all that information and let them know how big the pain really was. And then ask them to help me prioritize it.
Yeah. Okay, great. I guess I'll pick one more off this slide and then we'll move on. I think another one that's really important and probably is what people think of in a business case is optimizing your message for metrics and costs. And so you really want to frame the decision in terms of the measurable outcomes that you're going to achieve with this, right? Just to make it really easy for your stakeholders to understand the business case.
Yeah, I think doing that part, I mean, helps. You give them the data, they're like, oh, hey, wait, I'm saving money? What do you mean?
Right. Make it a math problem, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's start at the top of the organization, Jonathan. And can you help us kind of understand the perspective of the C-level stakeholder?
Our C-level, our CTO, he's actually really enthusiastic when it comes to automation. I mean, the technology and he wants us to thrive. He wants us to build. He wants us to create. He wants to put us in a position of, hey, we're the strong tech leaders. We're the strong tech organization. We're the strong tech group. So he's always motivated for things like that. Any new ideas, he'll jump on it, and I've seen him get in there and start coding too, and we've had to smack his hands a couple of times, but
Yeah, so he's really looking to drive innovation, right? I mean,
yeah, totally.
More with the resources that they have today, and so okay, great. Yeah, so I think that really speaks to a lot of the things on this slide here. So let's move on now to the managing director of operations, Jonathan.
Yep.
And so can you help us understand what this person does and what their roles and responsibilities are?
Yeah, our managing director of operations is the guy in charge of the network, telephones, telephonies, all the servers, all the database operations, the help desks. So he's got a lot on his plate. If you see him running around, it's usually because there's a fire going on and he needs to go get a SWAT team going. But he's his job is really difficult. But we do work very close together. And he's very he's always thinking about, okay, how do we cut operational costs? Because people are always telling him that too. That's his biggest pain. So
interesting costs. Yeah. So, all right. So that's one of the kind of the priorities that weighed into your conversation. Anything else, like, see the list here. Any other things that were really important for that managing director?
He and I were talking about databases, the database team, when I jumped on, and he said, here's what I'd like to see. I want us to be in a position where we can manage the flow of data. I don't want to be in a position to manage the value of the data, what's in it, but I want to make sure that we're managing the flow of data. And then the other thing is that he also mentioned that, hey, we get a lot of issues when we deploy to production. I like to find out a way to see if we can do it better. And so, that's where this whole thing started. So,
yeah. Okay. All right. Great. So we're going to move on now to the SVP of Technology Operations, which is, I think, your title, Jonathan. So what were your topmost goals and concerns?
My biggest goal is, my biggest concern is resource retention. We have people with intellectual property. We have people with expertise. We have people with the know-how. How do I get their skill going? How do I make them, how do I get them to thrive? And how do I take care of their skills so that they can use it as a career for their, what it is that they want to do. And all that breaks down to, what we already have it listed here.
Right.
Getting them to, be more creative.
Yeah. You wanted to retain these folks and you want to have the best possible, team. And if they're doing all these tedious tasks, they're not going to be able to.
Exactly. They're going to want to go somewhere else. If I'm clicking a button every day, well, guess what? I don't want to click a button. I want to click a different button.
Right. Okay. What about your boss? What was most important to them?
The metrics. We have a lot of chaos. We've got a lot of, like I said, the manual deployment doesn't give us exactly the right data that we want.
Okay.
He gets high level data. He doesn't really get to see the details of the data. And so what I've been able to do is I've been able to expose some of the stuff to him just by making some changes. So, as an example, we had incident tickets. We were up in the thousands on a monthly basis. After coming in and doing some small analysis, the team were able to chop it down by half just because they were analyzing the data better.
Okay.
So, but that has been consistent. So there are more stuff that we want to do, but we're getting there.
Right. So it was important to your boss that we made the problem manageable, or that you made the problem manageable, and that gives you the basis to improve it, right?
Oh yeah. You got to be able to
measure it.
Yeah, you need to be able to identify the problem, pinpoint it, and figure out what to do with it.
Okay, great. All right. So we've covered a lot of the stakeholders at the leadership level, but I want to dive down to the DBA's perspective, and I think it's especially important because our audience says this is one of the most troublesome, or the people they have the hardest time convincing. And so looking at it from the DBA's perspective, what was their most pressing concern?
Sometimes when you do something for so long, you think it's what you should be doing, and that's what life has to offer. And then somebody comes along and says, hey guys, why are you doing that? There's a whole new world that you need to get into. Technology is always growing. We need to embrace it. Let's start looking at how we can automate. Let's start looking how we can make life better for us.
Yeah.
Once you spark that into their head, you know, and you do have some DBAs that likes to just do DBA stuff, and that's okay because there's always room for that. And we're not here to change what they want, but we're here to give them a vision of what's better.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like you've seen kind of what I've seen, which is that oftentimes the DBA organization is, you know, they're so used to just doing things manually because there hasn't really been that kind of automation possibility. Yep. And so they're, you know, maybe not as exposed to the DevOps practices, the DevOps values. And so there's oftentimes maybe a lot of education you have to do there, right?
Yep. Yeah. A lot of education, a lot of convincing, a lot of one-on-one conversations. And then, you know, there are some people that just wants to say, tell me where I need to go, and I'm going. So those are, you know, those are huge opportunities. You just take it and you go. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, I guess, and the other thing that we mentioned earlier that I think is appealing to DBA, besides kind of that DevOps aspect, is just that they're going to have time to do stuff that's more meaningful to them, right? Yeah. And so I think, you know, helping them understand the shift of that will really help get them on board.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Ask a DBA if they like being woken up at 3 a.m.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. That's part of like articulating what the future looks like, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Better, right? Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So let's move on to the application side of the house. And so, Jonathan, you've told us that the database and the software teams are kind of, well, they function separately, maybe.
Yeah.
And so what can you tell us about the software's team's goals? Like, you know, it seems like DevOps would make their life a lot easier too, right?
Yeah. I mean, since I'm going to say around mid 2000, there's this concept of full stack. We're now moving away from specialists. You know, we don't really have a database developer specialty role in a small company. In a large organization like this, we really should have these guys who are specializing in databases and how to manage data and how to store data. Our application guys are doing both right now. And there are some groups that's doing just database. So the application guys are doing application code plus database code. And then they try to deploy both of them at the same time. So they have their own integration for, you know, whatever CI/CD that is that they do. But when it comes to the database piece, it's a little bit more difficult because now you got dependencies, you got constraints, you got, you know, whatever development work or beast was being created at the database level, it actually affects the deployment for them.
Okay, right. So it makes their lives more complicated, their deployments, you know, more prone to error, that kind of thing. And I guess I might pick up on one more thing, you know, like I'm curious, you know, previously before database DevOps, you had application developers opening tickets, that kind of thing. But did Liquibase kind of change all that and gives software developers like more control and maybe some kind of self-service ability?
Yeah, so I was talking to one of our leaders in one of our business sector, and he said, yeah, we always have deployment issues. You know, we deploy our software and then we deploy our database objects. And then I made a simple statement. I said, well, why don't you deploy the database first? He took a step back and he says, oh my gosh, that might work. And it's mainly because of the dependencies that between the coupling between database and application. And so what I did was I said, if I created a repository for you, moved all your code, database code into this repository, you make the changes that you need, you do the tag, you can deploy all the way up to stage, and then I'll take it to production for you. And they're like, oh my gosh, you mean I can deploy to these environment as I need? I go, yeah, it's all, you know, it's a workflow. We don't need to touch it.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, that's a great story. So, you know, giving them the app dev teams the really control of their own fate, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, they can deploy when they need to instead of when the DBA happens to be available, right?
Yeah. You code it, you own it.
Yeah.
You break it, you fix it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's single ownership. Okay, cool. All right. So we've gone through all of these personas here. And so we've gone from the C-suite to all the way down to the DBA teams and the software teams. And so you really had to connect with all of these different stakeholders and their goals and, understand their pain, that kind of thing. So did this get you the buy-in that you were looking for, or?
Oh yeah. The mortgage industry, switches. I mean, rules come out so quickly, and then we need to make changes quickly. So to be able to deploy to production faster, and more consistent, and having the ability to guarantee that your code will be delivered and it will work, is huge. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Sounds like you did a great job.
I hope so.
Yeah, cool. All right. So was there any hesitation around using Liquibase Pro, or was that an easy decision to make? I'm curious kind of what went into that.
It was a very easy decision to make on my part. Just having that flexibility, being able to do the plug and play, and giving the database, or giving the developers the ability to configure how Liquibase deploys the code to the database, made it really easy, because it's one of the biggest argument that development team have, or their biggest concern. I don't have control to move the code over to production. Well, right. If we can securely and safely allow them to configure that, then what other arguments are there? So this was a big one.
Okay. All right. Cool. All right. We have our buy-in. And so now it's time to get down to the actual work, right? So we're going to move into, now that we've got this alignment with all these different stakeholders, we're going to really move into kind of launching the project and how you roll this out. So
yeah,
great. And so that brings us to our next poll question here. And so the question is, what is your biggest hurdle to database DevOps adoption? So, is it having the money, the budget? Is it lack of relative priority? You got too many other things kind of getting in the way. Is it lack of clear ownership of who owns the problem? Or is it lack of support from the application developers or from the DBA side, or just really lack of clear next steps of how you need to move forward? So we're going to give folks a little bit of a chance to answer here. Okay. All right. So it looks like we're done here. And the top one is lack of prioritization. And so it sounds like, folks just have a lot going on with all the different initiatives. Jonathan, what about for you? Does that resonate? Or
yeah, it does. It does align with our company as well. There's always a bigger priority. There's always a bigger fish to fry. So, yeah. But as a tech leader, you have to stay focused, and you have to know what's important to you and your organization. So, to me, this is important, because guess what? Once you get this done, the priority for the rest of the things just flow right on through. You'll have more time to do other things. Your database engineers or your DBAs will have more time to enhance their skill set. You can actually allow training and give them the skill set that they need, and give them that balance that they need.
Okay, great. Yeah. So it sounds like the relative priority did resonate. I guess I've seen, like, especially in like financial services companies like yours, maybe, there's like, maybe compliance issues or regulatory issues you have to deal with. And so you kind of get distracted with all of that instead of being able to invest in the future. So definitely makes sense.
I think ownership is another area as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. When we introduced CI/CD, and we said, okay, you need to put your code in a repository. They thought the DBAs were supporting Git. I was like, what? No, you're a developer. You should know that.
Yeah, right.
Weird. It was kind of a weird concept for me.
Yeah. So what are the roles and responsibilities in
Yeah.
rolling this kind of process out?
Yeah,
Is
we had to
something
define
you
it.
have to define, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a
Okay.
step back, define it.
Yeah, great. All right. I'm going to move into, you know, we've got alignment. And so we've got everybody kind of on board and we're ready to go. But Jonathan, I'm just curious, like, how did you actually get this started, right?
Uh, you, yeah, you start small. Get some success in, work with one team. Get your first start has to be successful. I know there's a lot of pressure in saying that because if you fail on that first step, oh my gosh, everybody starts to doubt. So you have to get involved. I hate the concept of micromanaging, but keeping a close eye on things. Luckily for me, I have a technical background, so I do start hitting the keyboard. I do start, and I walk through. I used to manage another team, and so I said, hey, I'd like to give this to you guys first. I like for you guys to be the first one to do this, and they are a pretty strong DBE team. And they after the release, they actually told me, they're like, John, we went from waiting for 24 hours to just 2 hours for our deployment code to release. We've released 40 plus codes, scripts, and have not had any issues.
Yeah,
so
right.
we're delivering.
I think that's a great point. That it's really important, like when you need to choose the right team to start with, right?
Yeah.
You want someone for whom, like, this is going to provide some real value and improve their day-to-day lives. Yep. But also you want people who are like open to, doing something different, right? And are interested in, the DevOps. And so I think finding that, right confluence of factors is really important.
Yeah, alignment is one of the most key to your success.
Yeah, right.
It's so critical that this first, whoever it is successful, and you want them to be successful, and they want to be successful too. But you got to remind them that, hey, this is going to be successful. As long as you have that alignment and your go, you'll be fine. There's some other hard stuff that you need to work through, but that's the first thing I usually work with.
Okay, great. All right. Well, so you got that first team on board and started to demonstrate some success, and maybe use that kind of story and that success to drive some expansion of the usage.
Yep.
But can you tell us a little bit about how this changed your database release process?
Well, we went first of all, we went from 9 steps down to 4, and almost just to a button click. Developers are still doing what they need to do, which is, hey, I'd like to create this change ticket to go to production. They just give us the tag now, because as they're developing for their databases, they're actually telling us and indicating what order the script should be in. And Liquibase allows us for that detail. And at that point, by the time you get to production, my DBAs just take out whatever tag it is and say, take this tag to production. And that's it. So it's made my DBA's life a lot easier, a lot better.
Yeah, right. Another tool I've seen people use in this context is value stream mapping, right? To kind of help everyone visualize kind of the old way of doing things and all the costs there, and then what does the new way look like, and just visually seeing that impact of going from very complex process to an automated one.
Yeah, imagine you go through these 9 steps in every environment. There's a tendency to miss one environment or two because we're lazy by nature. So.
Yeah, right, for sure. Yeah, so automating it so it's consistent. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so we've got Liquibase implemented, and so now I'd like for us to shift into talking about the impact that this is having on the rest of the organization and on your metrics. And so I'm just going to kind of go through this here. I think what we see, and I think what you've seen, Jonathan, too, is that the value of database DevOps really kind of materializes for different personas across the organization, right? So, you've got not just the database team and the application developers, but really kind of the product managers being able to deliver, more value more quickly, and the business executives kind of really starting to see the implementation on the bottom line. And so, Jonathan, maybe you could just talk about how far along you are now in the process, and the impact that this change is now having.
Yeah, we're adopting. I literally hired one guy and I said, if you get a ticket and you're you're deploying it the old way, I need you to go in there and see how we can bring CI/CD to them. And then if there's any issues, let me know. And I said, this is your only job. I mean, this is your goal, and so I had to literally let this person know that this is my priority. So we're at the adoption phase, and we're going to bring in more databases to this automation, and just not only to help our DBA team, but it's also to help the company operations as a whole, and even our business.
Yeah, I think one thing you said is really important there, which is that you had someone on your team who was directly responsible for the rollout. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, right. So versus kind of being spread among, many people and not having clear lines of accountability, right?
Yeah. As a tech leader, I mean, we have to identify what is important to the operation. I had to go back and identify, how do we make this team a lot stronger? How do we make it better? And everybody who are on board they know the kind of work that they need to do to get to where that vision is. And one of the things I did was I said, here's the vision, guys. This is where we're going, and I'm not going to sway away from it. I'm going to stay in this lane until we get there.
Right.
And I'm going to chip at it until we get there. And then, our team need to know that we're dedicating resources to this and that we're committed. And so I said, okay, guy, here, this is your goal.
Yeah. Right. Having that person dedicated really sent a message to the rest of the organization about how important this was.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right. And so, let's this is where the rubber hits the road, right? In terms of the impact. So what measurable impact did this have? Being able to, deploy a change in minutes rather than a week.
Oh, I mean, the biggest problem, the biggest thing that we had is this deployment frequency. I mean, the more you deploy, the more bugs are in the production environment. And then you have to deploy again to fix the bugs. So when we have to deploy again to fix the bugs, those are emergency tickets. We had, by this time this year, or last year, north of 2,000 emergency releases. And that's deployment plus bug fixes. So afterwards, as of now, I mean, that's dropped down to less than 900. As a matter of fact, when I was preparing for this, I said, let me go take a look at that data. And I saw this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So I immediately pushed this up to my boss, and I said, hey, did you know we have less emergency releases? Mainly because now with CI/CD in place, it's all button clicks. We're, they're able to
remove that human element, right?
Exactly. Every lower environment is now consistent. The objects in the database are now consistent. There is no surprises.
Yeah.
When you move it over to production, you have a little bit more of a guarantee that it's going to work.
Right. I think that's what some people miss, because they don't understand kind of the manual impact and all that kind of stuff. And so, okay, great. And so, maybe we might just kind of look at the other things besides the DOOR metrics a little bit, because I think there's a huge impact, that we can look at from a different angle. So, we see some pretty impressive improvements here, but I'm curious, Jonathan, like, how did the rest of the organization, is the rest of the organization starting to really feel this now that, you're starting to see these metrics improve, and how is that translating for, the rest of the company?
Less pain. Those who are on CI/CD, DevOps, database DevOps, are seeing less pain, and they're also feeling a little bit more empowered because guess what? You can deploy to stage, but once you get to production, that's my role, and I probably have the easiest part at this point because guess what? They've already guaranteed that their code's going to work in the lower environment. The other thing is that we're delivering to production a lot faster. Providing them that ability to do their own work, to have the confidence that their code is going to deploy to promote to the higher environment.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Hey, I think we're now at the end of our presentation here, and so I'm going to turn this over to Shay to walk us through our Q&A.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time and a great presentation. Just as a reminder, if you have a question, go ahead and submit that in the Q&A panel, and we'll get through as many as we can in our last few minutes together. So let's just jump right in. The first question, it looks like for you, Jonathan, how did your stakeholder conversations happen? Meetings, presentations, etc.?
Yeah, you got to start with the meetings, but before you do the meetings, gather your data, figure out how you want to present it. I start with, I got a lot of pain. I'd like to get into paradise concept. Those are all good stuff for them.
Great, thank you. And who would you say was the trickiest stakeholder for you and why?
The trickiest are the dev leaders. All the other management team have always been really good, and they've always great partners because they want to be successful. The dev leaders, they want control. They own their development cycle. They've traversed through SDLC process, and they want a guarantee that their code is going to work when they go to production. Code deployment is risky for them. And so, to convince them and talk to them and say, hey, I'm giving you consistency, I'm giving you some level of guarantee, and I'm reducing your risk, was one of the trickiest things that I had to do.
Makes total sense. And so someone's comment, so how does one approach a leader that isn't as enthusiastic as Jonathan's? Because you mentioned earlier in the presentation, how on board your manager was from the start and enthusiastic. How would you have approached that differently if he wasn't as such?
Oh, he'll be very enthusiastic once you show him this cost savings for operation.
Value.
Gather that data and say, hey, you know what? I could be enhancing the skill set of the team. I could be making our team a lot stronger, and I could get them to do more. And here's how we do it, and here's why we would do it. It's because of the cost savings, and so cost savings, increased skill set, and a higher retention rate. Those are all big.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, here's another one. It says, what challenges did you encounter specific to being in the highly regulated finance industry?
Perceived tribal knowledge. We hire people, we think that they're the best at what they do, but sometimes we're a little bit lazy and we don't update our information, and a lot of times you got to dig into some of that stuff and say, hey, can you show me where this is? Maybe it's outdated, maybe it's not. So we got to be able to take them away from this mindset of this is what I do daily, this is who I am, this is what I am, and get them to think a little bit broader.
Sure. Thank you for that. Okay, here's another question. How did you choose the team to pilot with? Did you choose the hardest to influence, or did you choose the team most friendly to the change?
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, that first team is got to be successful. You got to choose, you got to find the team that you can align with, that's going to partner up with you. I mean, that's if you guys are in the same mindset, you have the same goal, and then you guys got to talk about your goals daily. Say, hey, well, it's going to be great. It's going to be great. I know the pain you're going through, but it's going to be great. And help each other get there. Once you get there, then, find that one person or that one team that can help you there. I mean, and also evaluate their skill set too. I mean, if that team skill set is strong and is reliable and it can develop and can make the change that you're looking for, then, those are all critical stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just wanted to double down on that. I think starting with a team that kind of has the DevOps basics down, if possible, like they already know Git, so they're not having to learn Git for the first time.
Yeah.
You just kind of want that first team to really have as smooth entry way as possible.
Yeah. I mean, eliminate some of the extra learning that you need to do, extra skill set that these people need to pick up. I know.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we have about time for one more question. So it says, what kind of software architectures are more suitable for using CI/CD with tools such as Liquibase to do database changes? There's some backend frameworks that implement ORM and perform migrations. Is this still applicable to these cases?
I'd be happy to. Go ahead, Jonathan. Yeah.
No, go please.
Well, yeah. So I think it's a great question because there's a lot of different application development frameworks, and they sometimes bring their own migration approaches. And I guess what I think a lot of companies are looking for is like a single way to manage this problem. Because if you have like all these different ways that you're building applications and they all have their way of delivering database changes, you don't have a single point where you can establish governance and observability and have a basis for continuous improvement. So all of those, applications will be compatible with Liquibase. And so I think that's what, as a technology leader, you want to look to is a way to standardize across all the different ways you're building applications.
Got it. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, folks, that is all the time we have for questions today. Just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Jonathan, for speaking. As a reminder, you will receive via email tomorrow a link to the recording of today's presentation that you can watch or share with interested colleagues. And you will also receive the business case presentation template that you can customize for your own needs that goes over a lot of what we discussed today with how you customize your message for different stakeholders in your organization that you're seeking buy-in from. So thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jonathan.
Hey, thank you guys for having me.